Superman, the first Marvel issue, is something that nearly came about in 1984. On the webpage, jimshooter.com, there are 2 pages that cover this topic. The first is the behind-the-scenes retelling by Jim Shooter himself. The second page covers the summary plot of Marvel's Superman issue number 1. First off, the behind-the-scenes background behind this unseen comic. Sometime in 1984, Shooter's secretary Lynn Cohen told him that Bill Sarnoff called. Sarnoff was the big cheese of Warner Communications, which ran DC Comics. Sarnoff wanted to talk about licensing all DC characters to Marvel Comics. Shooter was very interested and discussed it with Marvel's then president Jim Galton. Galton gave Sarnoff a call and told Sarnoff they weren't interested. Galton said, "Since DC books weren't selling, those characters must not be any good." Shooter explained that they were great characters and that the DC editorial people were doing a pretty poor job with them and that Marvel could do better. A lot better. Shooter talked him into calling Sarnoff back and told him they'd given it some thought. Shooter left his office with instructions to put together a business plan and present it to Joe Calamari, then Executive VP of Business Affairs. He decided that they'd launch with 7 titles and build from there, if all went well. The titles were Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Teen Titans, Justice League, and Legion of Superheroes. Shooter projected that they'd sell 39 million copies the first 2 years, generating a pre-tax profit of roughly $3.5 million. That was huge money for a comic book publisher back in 1984. Shooter presented the plan to Joe Calamari as ordered. He enthusiastically endorsed the plan. Galton was still skeptical. He thought the projections were crazy high. He sent the plan to the circulation department to review. Somebody leaked. Rumors spread. Shooter's first clue was when John Byrne showed up in his office one day with his cover for Superman, the first Marvel issue. It wasn't a sketch. It was a cover. Might have even been inked. Shooter doesn't have a copy of the thing, but he bets Byrne still has the original. Somebody should ask him to display it on his site if he hasn't already. He had a story worked out, too, as Shooter recalls. He really wanted to do Superman. Anyway, when the circulation department said that they had completed their analysis of the plan, Galton called for a meeting to discuss it. Galton asked what then VP of Circulation Ed Shukin's take on the numbers was. Shukin said the numbers were ridiculous. Galton sort of smirked at Shooter. "We'll do more than double these numbers," Shukin said. And so negotiations with Sarnoff began in earnest. Shooter was a spectator at that point. The suits took over. However, very soon thereafter, First Comics launched a lawsuit against Marvel Comics and others, alleging antitrust violations, among other things. According to Shooter, it was a load of bull as they alleged that Marvel had flooded the market. They alleged that Marvel had used their dominance to fix prices with World Color Press to inflate their costs. In discovery, it came out that Marvel was paying more than they were. They considered arguing that defense and pressing on with the trial. But no. Ultimately, the suits and lawyers decided to play it safe and backed away from the DC deal. Net result, no Superman first Marvel issue. Too bad. It would have been a fun ride. Now on to John Byrne's outline for Marvel's Superman issue number 1. John Byrne had submitted the plot to Jim Shooter for the first Marvel issue of Superman. The first chapter is entitled Krypton. As in the classic origin, scientist Jor-El has discovered that his world, the planet Krypton, is going to explode sometime within a month, but the other members refuse to believe the danger is real. Jor-El is angry. Let them all die then. At home, Jor-El talks things over with his wife Lara, who is 6 months pregnant. He has a plan to save her and their unborn child, to which she tearfully agrees. Jor-El makes preparations with frantic haste. As Krypton is rocked by its violent death throes, Jor-El and Lara say their last goodbyes. The launch must be timed perfectly. Jor-El knows that Lara and the fetus will become super powerful as they are affected by the rays of the yellow sun where they're headed. He also knows of an additional factor as well that will help them survive on the world that is their destination. Timing of the launch is critical to this mysterious factor. At the perfect moment, Jor-El waves to Lara in the little spaceship and launches the rocket. Lara looks back at the dying Krypton, which explodes, sending forth a burst of searing radiation. The mysterious additional factor, maybe? John doesn't say. Lara feels the radiation affecting her just before the rocket enters hyperspace. The hyper-light-speed journey takes 3 months. The second chapter is entitled Smallville, Earth, the USA, somewhere out in the sticks. 50-something Jonathan and Martha Kent are riding along in their pickup truck. They're farm people. Good people. They witnessed the little ship launched months ago by Jor-El crash in a field. They run to investigate. Jonathan pulls a badly injured Lara from the wreckage. Right then and there, with the Kent's help, she gives birth. The child, a boy, yelps when Jonathan slaps him on the butt. He seems unharmed and is healthy. Just before she dies, though, Lara names the boy Kal-El. The childless Kents decide to keep the baby as their own. They name him Clark. They successfully convince friends and neighbors that 50-something-year-old Martha had been pregnant the whole time, but they kept it secret. There is no mention of what became of the wreckage of the ship or Lara's body. At the age of 2, at Clark's birthday party, we are introduced to the Langs, friends of the Kents, and their infant daughter, Lana. Clark begins to demonstrate fantastic strength, but only the Kents see. At age 10, Clark is attacked by a bull while crossing a pasture. The bull does its best to kill him, but cannot harm Clark. His clothes are not so lucky. They're shredded. Clark flips the 1,000-pound bull over his head, then runs home to tell his mom and dad about the event. The bull, by the way, is okay. Jonathan and Martha caution Clark to keep these things he can do a secret, lest government or military people find out and come to take him away for who knows what purposes. At age 15, while playing with his dog, Clark discovers that he can defy gravity. The dog playfully leaps at him, knocking him backward a few steps. Instead of falling into a drainage ditch behind him, though, Clark finds himself hovering over it. After a little practice, he finally learns how to fly. Meanwhile, Jonathan, in his late 60s at this point, is trying with 2 other men to physically pull a tractor out of some mud it's stuck in. The exertion triggers a heart attack, and Jonathan Kent dies. The third chapter is entitled Metropolis. Years later, after graduating at the top of his class from journalism school, Clark is hired as a reporter by Perry White, editor-in-chief of the Daily Planet in Metropolis. He meets brash Jimmy Olsen, a cub reporter, and Lois Lane. Byrne describes her as beautiful, but in a city-slick, used sort of way, tousled and vaguely rough at the edges. She's the type who would curse a lot. Clark is instantly infatuated. She welcomes Clark. Lois and Clark, both superb reporters, become not-so-friendly rivals, despite Clark's infatuation. He allows her to win, to get to the story first sometimes. Perry White urges Clark to try harder. Women and children first is for lifeboats. White somehow knows a big story is about to break and tells Clark to get to it. The next day, the president is taken captive by terrorists. Lois investigates by traditional means. Clark quietly uses his powers to locate the farmhouse where the president is being held and alerts the authorities. They storm the place. 5 people die in the raid, and the president is gravely injured. Clark realizes that if he had handled it himself, he could have saved the president without any loss of life. The little light bulb goes on. He talks it over with his adoptive mother, Martha. They agree that he should stop hiding his powers and use them for good. To protect those close to him, he has to keep it secret that he, Clark, is the hero he now means to become. When he was a kid, Martha made him wear glasses he didn't need to make him more human. He'll start wearing glasses again to help disguise himself when he's Clark Kent. A point of difference from his hero self. Martha, anticipating this day, long ago bought red, yellow, and blue cloth from which to make a costume. Apparently, as Clark aged, he developed something, an aura perhaps, that more and more protected his clothing when he did super things. So she will make him a skin-tight uniform to take best possible advantage of that. The 4th chapter is entitled The Man of Tomorrow. Sometime later, a caped costume figure breaks up an armored car robbery and frees hostages. Bullets bounce harmlessly off his chest. He turns the miscreants over to the police and flies away. The caped man spectacularly rescues a stuck tramway car. Then he pulls subway cars full of people from a collapsed tunnel. Lois Lane is there, reporting. She reaches the caped man before he can fly away. She doesn't recognize him as Clark. She is as attracted to this caped hero as Clark was to her. Lois wants to tell this mysterious hero's story. She asks him questions, which he answers. This will be her greatest coup ever as a reporter. Sorry, the caped man says. He's already given his story to someone else, Clark Kent. He then flies away. Elsewhere, later, a shadowy figure watches television news accounts of the exploits of the caped man. He reads the Daily Planet article by Clark Kent, which has the bold headline, "Superman! Mystery hero promises to battle for truth, justice, and the American way." The shadowy figure is criminal mastermind Lex Luthor, who decides that he's going to have to get rid of this Superman.